Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Broxton, and welcome to the PIN webinar series. This webinar series touches upon how multidisciplinary applied research can be used to make a community impact and to improve the human condition. Today, we will be sharing a previously recorded video, including panelists representing the Middle Georgia Innovation Corridor. Thank you to all of our panelists for both their time at the initial recording and for allowing us to share this information with today's wider audience. We're so excited to highlight the innovative work happening across the state. After the video, please stick with us to learn more about some upcoming opportunities with the partnership to get involved in community research. For now, please hold while we transition to the video.
I'm Angie Giesling with the Development Authority of Houston County, and also a member of a group that we'll talk about for a minute called MIGEA, the Middle Georgia Economic Alliance. I want to thank the Partnership for Inclusive Innovation, particularly Deborah and Stephanie, for bringing this program to our community. You will hear from our mayor a little bit later, LaRonda Patrick, and I know she as well is so pleased to have you all here today. I'll introduce my guests. We're going to keep this as casual as possible up here and just kind of have a conversation. We welcome y'all and at any point to ask questions and come into the conversation. But we have with us David Burrell, all the way from Ireland today. So glad that we actually had time to capture you while you're in the U.S. He works all over the world. He is the founder of the consulting firm Future IQ. Also very pleased that we could have Brigadier General John Kubinick. John's serving twofold up here with us today. He is the former commander of the Warner Robins Air Logistics Complex, part of Robins Air Force Base, and most currently he is the president and CEO of the 21st Century Partnership. So welcome to the two of you. Thank you. I think the audience might be a little bit curious about how we got here today. And being part of a large military installation can be both a blessing and can cause some concern. We here employ over 22 to 24,000 people on any given day. I don't know when this came about, but at some point the Department of Defense did recognize that the communities with military installations don't need to be totally dependent on that installation, and put a program together by what means you could diversify your economic base, or you could do things to accentuate your relationships that you have with your military installation. So we were very fortunate that we were able to participate in this grant program. We've been fortunate to be a recipient several times over, and I want to take just a minute to thank Laura Mathis. She's executive director of the Middle Georgia Regional Commission. If not for Laura and her team, this would never come to us as an opportunity. It also came by way of the Georgia Department of Economic Development. Amy Hudnall was at that time with the Centers for Innovation. We were able to bring in some key team members, 21st Century Partnership. Also, we had a representative at the time who we miss dearly from Robins Air Force Base, who kind of gave us that perspective from inside the fence. The group that I mentioned earlier is the Middle Georgia Economic Alliance. It's a group here, if you are familiar with the state's delivery regions, ours is just right around Middle Georgia, 11 counties. And the economic developers in each one of those counties formed about 15 years ago and decided that we needed to work together and not against, and pull all of our assets together. So we've been very fortunate to have that relationship for many years, and two of my partners are here in the room, Judy Shirley with Twiggs County and BJ Walker in Peach County. So thank y'all for being here. We started a process at around 2017, and I would imagine a lot of you in the room have been a part of strategy sessions where you get focused on the things that are not right in your community or in your area, and we seem to just focus on those, and many times we found there are things that we can't control anyway. So we decided to take a different approach, and we're fortunate that we were able to bring world-renowned help in here with Future IQ. David has also worked with a lot of communities that have military installations and brought that experience to us. And we just decided to look at what's right among our 11 counties and how do we pool our resources together. And what ultimately resulted in the second round, where we received additional funding, was the Middle Georgia Innovation Project. So I'm going to pitch this to you, David, and just tell everybody kind of what this project is about and how it came to be.
Okay, well thank you, Angie. Hello everybody. So long story short, and so I think, Angie, you hit on some of the things, which is obviously the Department of Defence is very interested in what happens around its major concentrations, be it contractors or bases. And why that interest is there is because the ecosystem that surrounds these big military complexes has a lot to do with the sustainability and the resilience of a base. So you mentioned 20,000 plus employees, right? Well, they all have homes and they live in communities and so on, right? So that's well understood by the Department of Defence. And the initial work we did was really interesting because it was looking at how do we strengthen but also leverage, right? How do we strengthen the base and its capacity to be able to serve future missions, but how do we also leverage that to build the economy and build the resilience? The other thing that came out of the initial work was a real recognition that collaboration is a key behaviour and value going forward. So that was sort of some foundational work, and then that led to really exploring this whole notion, or what led to the notion of the Middle Georgia Innovation Project and Corridor. And that really was the sort of outcome of a lot of planning about how do we execute on that set of principles about building collaboration and building resilience and diversification around the base. I personally think it's incredibly exciting to have this conversation about this innovation corridor. Because as you mentioned, Angie, we work in a lot of different locations, and what I think smart people are wrestling with at a regional level in the world today is where does our region fit into the world? You know, we know the world's changing fast. What's our unique value proposition? How do we be a little bit different? How do we really focus in on what we think we're good at to be able to build this kind of future going forward? And here, from the task force and other people who are involved in the process, we really drilled in on this notion of building an innovation corridor, leveraging on innovation, that capacity for knowledge creation in the region. When you look at it, it's really extraordinary, the depth of that, plus some really perhaps surprising world-leading implementation of technology in the base and other locations. So this innovation corridor concept becomes a lens to look at that, to be able to really propel this sweet spot for what we think is there for Middle Georgia in becoming like an innovation centre in the world and putting all those pieces together. So I'll leave it at that as the start.
Okay. There are, we look to the Lieutenant Governor's pledge to become the technology capital of the East Coast. And we thought that we could play a part in that. And I know that Metro Atlanta can stand alone with the assets that are there, but we really started looking not only at our military installation, but at the other installations around our state and where those strengths are, particularly in the areas of technology. We also, I think it's important to mention that we didn't come up with this notion on our own. We aligned the assets, we looked at the many innovation centers that are already here in the Middle Georgia area, and particularly all the colleges and universities that are around and the assets there. But we pulled in, thanks to David, a lot of outside help, people that are already in a position where they can very confidently proclaim that they have this type of strength, and they are true leaders in technology and innovation. And in the end, we probably had over 900 people that in some way participated through polls. We did this during COVID. I think that's important to mention too. Our first round, we were all together, and we all know the benefit of being able to sit around a table together. But for this phase of the project, it was all done online, and we finally decided that maybe that was a blessing in the end, because we did get a lot of input from a lot of different people. But I think too, we've got General Kabinik here with us, and I think that if you can kind of share where you think this really fits in with the military and the future of the military, that might be very helpful for us.
Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? It's good to see you all. It's great to be with you this morning. I was going to say it's great to represent Robbins, but I really can't technically do that anymore. But I can still give you my opinion on how things are at Robbins Air Force Base today, and then in my role with the 21st Century Partnership. That's what we do every day, is think about how we can best support the men and women and the missions at Robbins Air Force Base. So it's an honor to be able to do that. I want to thank Dan Rhodes, our Chief Operating Officer at 21st Century Partnership, an instrumental part of the Middle Georgia Innovation Project and all the work that was done. So would you join me in giving Dan a round of applause for all of his work? I think the fact that the Department of Defense invests in projects like this is an indication that we, and excuse me for still using the we when I talk about the DoD, after 32 years it's hard to break that, but it's that the Department of Defense realizes that we're not in this alone. For our bases and our missions to be successful, we have to have strong partners, and we have to have strong communities that support our base. We're very blessed in Middle Georgia to have this community and the Middle Georgia region to support Robbins Air Force. Even before I was ever stationed here, I'd heard about the community support to Robbins from Middle Georgia. And I heard the acronym every day in Middle Georgia's Armed Forces Appreciation Day. I'd never even been here before, and I'd heard that. That's the reputation this community has. And I think this project is just one more step in that. Because, let me tell you, it's not just a slogan. It's not just words that's painted on the water tower. It's not just words that the mayor has in the hedges when you win Warden Robbins. Every day in Middle Georgia's Armed Forces Appreciation Day is a way that this community lives. And how this community supported the base 20 years ago is not exactly how the community needs to support the base as we move forward. And as the base and the Air Force is looking to change how we do business and how we defend this nation, the communities have to change with it. And what the base requires is different than it was before. And so I think one of the great things about this project is it just reiterates that need for the partnerships, that if we have a strong, innovative community, that will in turn help the base. And if we have a strong, innovative base, that will in turn help the community. And so it really is the rising tide that lifts all boats here. What is good for Robbins Air Force Base is good for Middle Georgia and vice versa. And so if we can work on building that innovation corridor here in Middle Georgia that helps industry, that's going to help the base. And if we do things that are going to help the workforce of Robbins Air Force Base in the future, that helps the community. I want to thank Dr. Peterson for his partnership when he was at the president at Georgia Tech. I know he's still there and teaching. We talked about in 2 weeks he'll be teaching a thermodynamics course. So if any of you need refreshers in thermodynamics, you've got your expert right here. I tried to forget all that from my time at the Air Force Academy. But one of the very first things I did in command, this would have been almost 6 years ago now, is sign an educational partnership agreement with Georgia Tech. Because we realize at the base that we've got to be good partners with our academic institutions, because we need that workforce of the future. One of the neat things about Robbins, and I think one of the reasons why it makes the tide of the community so strong, is of the 24,000 people that work here every day, 17,000 wear a uniform kind of like this, or they wear jeans, steel-toed boots, and t-shirt to work, and not the military uniform that I wore for 32 years. And those men and women are many times second, third generation employees of Robbins Air Force Base. And they're not leaving Middle Georgia, they're staying right here. And so we need to make sure we have a pipeline of the workforce for that future. And that's why partnerships like we had with Georgia Tech, and we have since signed with all the institutions in our region are so important. And so I think from my initial thoughts, I just wanted to say the partnership that we have with this region and the partnership through the Innovation Project is vitally important to the future of the Air Force, and I'll talk a little bit about that future a little bit later.
I think too, if we started thinking, Dan, Rose, and I have been kind of connected at the hip through this, and this project was building some momentum. People were buying into it along the way, and then some things just naturally started to occur. And I think it might be interesting for everybody to hear a little bit about the public-private partnerships that you have led, both when you were inside the fence and now outside
Sure.
the fence, and how that has contributed to the corridor.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing, when I was commander at the base, we realized that there's an area of our mission that was growing and growing exponentially, and I'm sure many of you in industry see the same thing, and that was in our software development. So at Robins Air Force Base, we have a software group that develops software for our weapon systems. If you think of any Air Force weapon system, C-17 or F-15, they are all basically flying computers these days. And so much like your phones that need the iOS update or your updates every so often, these aircraft need updates too. You can imagine if there's vulnerabilities on your phone, there are enemies of our nation that are trying to exploit vulnerabilities in our weapon systems. And so the men and women at Robins Air Force Base do a tremendous work in protecting those systems through the software and upgrading our systems and modernizing them. And so as we grow this software workforce, we really needed to look at how we do this different as we move forward, because the need for that type of future workforce is going to be there in industry, and it's going to be there at Robins, and it's not going to get smaller. So the only thing we can do is grow the pie and make that workforce pipeline bigger, because we're all going to need that kind of talent in the future. And so one of the ways we wanted to do that was in partnering with the communities, and we took a couple steps to do that. One, we started an off-base software lab in downtown Macon called Blue Sky, and partnered with our friends at Mercer University there to really get after some real software development, cutting edge work that we do there. But that certainly wasn't enough for where we wanted to go. And I'll just tell a quick story if you'll indulge me. We're having a meeting on base in my office, and a lot of the leaders from Middle Georgia were there, and I was talking about this need and the need for us to grow our software work, and frankly on base we were running out of space, physical space to put our folks, and so we had this discussion. At the end of the meeting, the chairman of the Board of Commissioners, Houston County, Chairman Stolniker, called me into my own office to have a discussion. You ever been called to the principal's office? I'm sure no one in this room has ever been that way. I felt like I was getting called to the principal's office, but I was getting called to my own office. I'm like, how can this happen? But if you know Chairman Stolniker, you know how that can happen, right, Angie? Yeah. We sat down and talked about it. He said, I think I have an answer for you. And of course, then he said, Angie, figure this out. And so with Angie and her chairman, Ben Holbert, who's here, thank you, Ben, for being here and for your support. The county, Houston County, bought a building for the base to do their software development work in. They heard the need, they acted, they bought a building to give to the base. The base then put a lot of money into turning it into a world-class software development facility. And if that were the end of the story, that'd be a great story. But it's not the end of the story. The best part that has come out of this is the partnership we have with the Houston County Board of Education and their Career Academy. So we carved out space right in the middle of this software development. We have government civilians that are writing code for our aircraft, and right next door to it we have a classroom where we bring high school students in that are part of the Career Academy, and they're learning software coding and software development, and they can be mentored by our civilians that are doing this every single day. And that has really taken off and has become, I think, a model for moving forward, and we're looking at ways that we can expand that across Middle Georgia as well. Because those students are the ones that will then go to Georgia Tech or to Middle Georgia State or to Mercer or other schools, and then we'll be able to compete for their talent in the Air Force. And we hope that by the fact we've exposed them to the great work that we do for our nation, that they'll be more inclined to say yes, because these young men and women are going to have offers all over the place. And so if we can expose them to the great work that's being done for our nation right here in Middle Georgia, right here at home for them, and they can come back and have that kind of work here, we think that's going to help us in the future. You know what? If it doesn't help us, it's going to help industry. It's going to help our community. It's going to help innovation in the future. It's been a big win-win, and we're really excited about, we call it Project Synergy, and it really is a synergy. I think Angie named that, and I know you did. It's a beautiful facility. I encourage you to come and see it sometime soon. In fact, we'll have both of our U.S. senators and the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, Senator Reed, will be there next week at Project Synergy to see what we're doing there. It has been a big win for us and really will help move this concept of innovation forward for our community.
We've talked a lot about, and we'll get into workforce some. That's really a large piece of this for us. And as a region, we've been hyper-focused on workforce already and the needs that are there. But we also realize that through this effort, we've got to grow our own, which General Kabinet was alluding to. But we've also got to import people. It's just a fact. There are several hundred software engineering or related jobs that are available. And I will talk to you a little bit about growing our own. Because of Project Synergy, in essence, the Synergy continued to build, and we were able to open up this internship program for graduating high school seniors who had already declared a STEM field. And I think what is most impressive about that, so they had their year before they went to college. They went off and did the freshman year thing, and we were like, okay, how many will come back? Because you can come back for 3 more years. All but one returned to that program. And I think that is impressive, and we just keep reminding ourselves that might be 25 down, but that's 25 down. And I think that, you know, as far as trying to develop some allegiance with these students, I think that that was really a testament to that they were really excited about coming back again. We had another challenge where our Career Academy was also trying to grow that software engineering pathway, and we did not have space there in our existing facility. And so the base graciously opened up a large classroom for the students to learn, and then we brought in Middle Georgia State University, worked alongside them to develop curriculum. We're very fortunate now to our school systems are starting to realize that we need to speak to industry to develop curriculum, and I'm so pleased that Dr. Kuhang is here with us today and has really carried this and just told me he's excited. We've got a great class that's coming in now. And then the thought is we take what's working here, we pilot things, and then we move it out into the other communities around us. And we'll get on workforce again in just a minute, but I want to see, David, is there anything maybe I've missed you want to add?
Yeah, thank you, Angie. I do want to hit on a couple of things. So one, obviously, when we're talking about innovation, you know, the foundation for that is digital technologies, you know, and that's the foundation for Industry 4.0 and all those things that are coming in. The General really hit on that in terms of the Project Synergy and so on. But when you think about this as a strategic positioning for a region and how do you be competitive for that workforce, Angie, that you hit on, I think regions today have to think both at the very system level, like how do we produce people with the talent, but you also have to be thinking about how do we make our region appealing for people to move to and to stay in. And you'll notice on the screen there, we've got the homepage of the Middle Georgia Innovation Project up, and you'll see that at the top there's 2 sides. So one is about innovating in Middle Georgia, all the things we've been talking about. The other side is about living in Middle Georgia. And one of the things we really uncovered through this process is a notion that there's a lot of hidden good stories about living here. And I think that it's really worth putting that front and center because, you know, globally there's a competitive race, as you mentioned, right? But also nationally, make no mistake, you're in a competition for skills in the future. All those skills that are going to empower Industry 4.0, all those digital technologies. So thinking about how do you articulate and promote your region as both a great place to live and all the things that come with that, but it's also a great place to innovate. And let me take those 2 sides. So the great place to innovate, what do you need to have that? Well, these days, people want to be close to where the action is. They want to be close to something that's going on that's fun, particularly people who are involved in those sort of sparks of idea type of projects. The whole notion of this corridor is trying to put some definition around where is the action occurring that you can be close to. So if you look at any kind of notion of a sort of an innovation area of some sort, as human beings, we are just wired to geography. You know, we're going to describe it as a triangle or a valley or a cluster or something, right? And where we got to in this process was this notion of a Middle Georgia Innovation Corridor. And if you think about the geography of that, we're think broadly, Macon at one end, Warner Robins Air Force Base at the other, right? And why we're saying that is that it gives some definition. And if you look at what's inside that area, you have, I think, a world-beating set of assets. From a major military installation that's a driver that's right at the front edge of application of robotics and so on, you know, through these remarkable, you know, tertiary education institutions. And then interestingly, you have Macon and Macon Shore, gritty, all that kind of stuff, right? But we're right now in a world where we're starting to see this migration of people out of macro cities and regional centres, tier 2 cities like Macon, nationally are very appealing for the very kind of people who you may want in some of these innovation projects. You know, they want to be part of something that's doing something interesting. They like a little bit of that kind of new look to it, right? So if you put that together, there's a really interesting value proposition in terms of, you know, a sort of a consortium you can bring together, create those cross connections that allow people to spark off each other. You know, one of the nice things about the collaborative culture is that we naturally get driven into our institutions. You know, the base, if you take that for example, you have a fence, right? And so
Big one.
a big fence, right? But what this innovation corridor is about how do we try and create those cross connections that allow ideas to flow and percolate. That's a real fantastic strength. Then you couple that with perhaps an interesting emerging proposition about a place to live. That, I think, is the world-beating combination of a story about innovation in Middle Georgia, innovating here and living here. And those things have to go hand in hand. That's what we really uncovered in this process. Do one without the other, and you will only make a fraction of the progress that you potentially could. So I just wanted to add that perspective in too, Angie.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, David. And I give a lot of credit to the leaders in Middle Georgia right now, because our leaders think in a regional way. And I haven't been here all that long, but I understand it hasn't always been that way in Middle Georgia. But what I've seen in my time here, when you have leaders like Mayor Walker from Perry, who's here today, and Mayor Patrick, Mayor Miller and Macon, they think regionally. They think and really, we have a lot to offer in this region. Nothing against our friends in Metro Atlanta, of course, but here in Middle Georgia, that's why I always refer to as Middle Georgia. We are one region, and if we capitalize on all of our strengths, there's no limit to what we can do as we move forward.
Yeah, great. And if I could add one thing on that too, right, is that, I do think Metro Georgia, I don't know that it's a direct competition, but you're certainly an alternative, right? Mm-hmm. And those big cities are not for everybody. And so there's a really interesting proposition here as a very close proximity, but as an alternative. I should also add though is that while I talked about that geographic corridor being Macon to Warner Robins to the Air Force Base, the whole premise of the planning in this is it is the whole region. And the idea is that people may live outside that corridor, but they can be part of the action. So this is actually a multi-county type approach that's really thinking about how to lift the whole of Middle Georgia, but being realistic that where the concentration of assets is and what drives it is really largely inside that corridor. But this is a regional ecosystem, and there's a community fabric that runs across that, right? And I just want to make sure, I want to be explicit that nobody's forgetting that it's a multi-county regional effort, but let's look at where the core is and activate that core, and it will spill over and have impacts everywhere.
Thanks, David. I'd be remiss too, I was kind of going back in my mind to how we started along this path with this notion, and The first thing we recognized and are certainly proud of is that Robins Air Force Base was already considered a software center of excellence as viewed by the Department of Defense. So there's certainly something to build from there, and that's truly where we started in this process. So in talking about workforce a little bit, I'd like to talk about your recent announcement the partnership had in the latest partnership for STEM with Robins. Can you speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, so one of the things that we realize in the 21st Century Partnership is as we think about supporting the missions at Robins Air Force Base, we've got to support the missions that are here today, and we have to be able to support the missions that are going to be at Robins in the future. And we have some changes in missions that are coming up right now. And one of the things that we thought we could best do to support Robins Air Force Base is to ensure the workforce of the future will be there with the skills that the future of Robins will require. And so we recently signed an agreement with the base that would allow our base employees to have time on duty to come out and mentor young men and women in STEM. And it's a great partnership that we've had with the base. We've been doing it for a while. We formalized it here finally, and we're able to get our men and women from Robins Air Force Base to come out and be these mentors for young men and women across our region. They are kids that are learning STEM, that are interested in STEM, can actually have someone to talk to that's doing it day to day and doing it for our nation at Robins Air Force Base. And that's important, and we invest a lot in the STEM education and the partnership, because as we look at the new missions that are coming to Robins, we're gonna have to grow our STEM pipeline. I talked about it a little bit earlier, but that workforce development piece is so critical to the future of Robins Air Force Base. I'll just give you a couple examples. We're getting ready to retire the E-8 Joint Stars aircraft. That aircraft has been a mainstay in combat operations for the last 30 years. It's an amazing platform, but it's a 707 airframe. If you all went up to Hartsville, which I have to do this afternoon, and jump on a plane, if I saw it was a 707, I would probably turn around and I said, I'll drive, thank you very much. But our men and women in the Air Force are flying these 707s in combat operations every single day. And not only are our J-Stars 707s, they were used when the Air Force bought them in the early 90s. These aircraft had a full service life, some with Eastern Airlines, one with the Royal Jordanian Air Force, one was a cattle hauler in South America. I'm not making this up, by the way. I do make things up. This I'm not making up. So we bought used aircraft. We turned them into high-end, very capable, thanks to our industry partners, combat platforms. But in the high-end fight against Russia or against China, those platforms aren't going to be survivable, and they're not going to be able to do what our nation needs them to do. So those aircraft are retiring, and we're working very closely with our delegation and with the Air Force to ensure that the new missions that come into Robins are going to be above and beyond what we even have today. And so those missions are going to focus a lot more on the digital realm. Advanced Battle Management System is all about linking together different nodes of communication and command and control. And that is all digital driven. As we think about our main mission at the base, the Air Logistics Complex, a lot of times we think about, well, that's wrench turning, and that's nuts and bolts. And there is a big element to that. And without our friends at the technical college system providing skilled artisans, we would not be able to be successful. But it's a lot more than that. Robins Air Force Base is the leading DoD industrial site for robotics implementation. I encourage you, if you ever get a chance to come out to Robins and let them show you what they're doing with robotics, it's incredible. And this is not robotics where you've got someone that's programming the robot to do the same task over and over again. This is robotics where the robot itself, through AI, is programming itself to do varied tasks and different tasks every single time. It may be depainting a certain component, but that component doesn't look the same. Every component's going to be a little bit different. It may be situated differently. And that the robot, through our folks that are working this project, programs itself, figures out the best way to do things. That's the kind of missions, both in the industrial complex and in the operations, that we have that we will have at Robins in the future, and we have to ensure that the workforce is there to support that.
Thank you. So we, as as a group, decided that we needed actionable items that we could take advantage of once we were done working, and hopefully we're not done working, but at the conclusion of this phase with Future IQ. So one was to create this Middle Georgia Innovation Corridor, have a focus on Industry 4.0 technologies, take that out to our industry where needed. We talked about amplifying the STEM and software engineering program offerings, and then just broaden that appeal, as David mentioned, to living here. There is a website, 478 Innovates. That's our area code, if you don't know that. And we will continue to update that. We're very fortunate. We're still working toward additional funding where we can expand the Living in Middle Georgia reach, and also to bring in a project manager that will be totally responsible for the future of the innovation corridor. And I think that one thing I do want to mention is now we're at the point where we want to make sure that we haven't just decided something for our communities and we don't have the buy-in from them. So I'm just really pleased that today in particular we have Mayor Patrick from the city of Warner Robins and Mayor Walker from the city of Perry, who will be the first to proclaim that they do see indeed that we are an innovation corridor and that they will be members and supportive of that. So we will take this message and spread it throughout the region from here. So I thank y'all for letting us, especially thank you to Penn for allowing us to use this as an official launch for the Middle Georgia Innovation Corridor. Stephanie, do we have time? Are there any questions, or I think we're right, probably on time? Okay. Did anybody have a question?
Angel, let me just say in closing, thank you all for being here and for your support. I started with talking about partnerships and how important it is. I'll close by talking about how important partnerships is for Robins Air Force Base, and that's what I think about every day is how to support those men and women and those missions. So thank you to our educational institutions. It's so vitally important as we grow that future. I also want to thank our industry partners, our defense contractors, and Mr. Womack. Georgia Power is a huge supporter of us in the partnership, but also for Robins Air Force Base. Some of the things that we got to do with energy innovation at the base, and you can understand we are a huge energy consumer there. And when the power goes out at Robins, it's not like, oh, well, power goes out, I guess we'll be all right. These systems go down and it takes forever to bring back up, and we literally will lose $1 million a day if we can't have our operations. One of the things that, along with software, we do is all the electronic warfare and avionics component repair for our Air Force at Robins. And you can imagine, just like any server room, those rooms have to be chilled, and here in Middle Georgia it can get warm. And so the innovative things we're doing with Georgia Power, if you drive down 247 and you see the solar the farm that's there, that land was bought by this community, thanks Laura Mathis and the Middle Georgia Regional Commission, because it was an encroachment area. But instead of just saying, okay, we're going to buy up this land so no one can encroach upon it, how are we going to use it for its best use that's compatible with the military? Well, how about the solar project that then gives the base an ability to tap into that when needed? All of those things, those are just examples of how our industry partners and our educational institutions and our governments here serve to support Middle Georgia and Robins Air Force Base, and why I do believe this is a great innovation corridor.
David?
Yeah, just one thing I wanted, so that's fantastic commentary, and one thing I want to just add as an extension of that is that the innovation corridor, think of it also about, well, what happens if this corridor gets traction and the communities become leading innovative communities? You know, that if there's industries beyond the base, you know, food processing, and you know, that the focus of this is really how do you make yourself an epicenter for innovation across the board. Sure, one of the massive benefits is the missions at the base, current and future, but think of it as also driving the community evolution, driving other industries, other components. You know, what's the next iteration of education look like? It's about bringing that thinking together, so we're thinking innovation in all dimensions of the region and of the community. So I just want to add that, Angie.
Thank you. And with that, we'll close.
Alrighty. Again, thank you so much to our panelists for that great overview of the Middle Georgia Innovation Corridor. If you would like to learn more about that initiative and learn how to get involved, please visit their website at 47innovates.com, 478innovates.com. With the remaining minutes of the webinar, I would like to share an upcoming opportunity for community research assistance with the partnership. This month, we are planning the Pinnacle Symposium. This virtual event will allow researchers from diverse universities and disciplines to workshop ideas for impactful and innovative community research projects together with the communities they will impact and pursue funding for their idea as an outcome. Municipality representatives will give flash presentations about the challenges they face, while faculty researchers will give flash presentations about their areas of interest and relevant projects. The partnership will then facilitate breakout groups where they will form community research teams to discuss application for the partnership's seed funding as an outcome. We are currently recruiting representatives from Georgia municipalities, cities, or counties, and higher education faculty from any institution in the state who have challenges or interests in the following areas to join us for the event. The first is mobility and equity, so that's anything that involves improving transportation for all. The second is smart resilience, so that includes topics like disaster response, energy efficiency, and public safety. And the final topic area is any smart cities topic, so any project that leverages technology and data to improve municipal operations. If you are interested in participating as a community representative or as a researcher, please reach out to me. You can find my contact information on this slide. Finally, please remember to follow the partnership on LinkedIn and Twitter using the handle @PinGeorgia for information about all our upcoming opportunities under our 4 pillars, including student engagement, workforce development, economic opportunity, and of course, community research. Thank you for your time this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you soon.